Welcome, everybody, to Booze Hour Community Edition. Today, we got a special guest that I'll bring on in just a second. But first, a couple things that I wanted to remind everybody of. If you have not clicked subscribe and you're watching this from YouTube right now, there's a subscribe button right here. Go ahead and click that. There's also a like, a thumbs up right beside that if you want to click that as well. And there's also a bell for notifications. That way, you can know exactly when I'm going live and any of the upcoming videos that are released as well. Most of the stuff that I do now is live. So there is a community edition that's always been live, the show, the cloud edition, which has been always live. And then there's also the weekly update that myself and Daryl are on every Monday that we used to pre-record, and now that's actually live as well. So every Monday morning for 30 for 30 minutes, you can jump on and you can interact with myself and Daryl, whether you have something interesting that you want to share from your weekend, you just want to say hi, you have some sort of Q&A when it comes to F5 related stuff. We're there for 30 minutes every Monday morning, and it's been enjoyable so far doing that live and just jumping on and hearing from folks. We'll always have a guest segment on that as well. Usually somebody relevant in our world of F5, internal usually, or partner organizations as well, alliance partners. So this past week, if you haven't checked it out, yesterday's episode, we had Rick Salsa on, who's a senior product owner for the F5 Cloud Services and for a little bit of NGINX as well. And so he's a pretty interesting guy in that for Daryl and I, we're the two F5 employees that reside in Vancouver, but he's actually a remote employee that's been around at F5 for a long time and lives in Kelowna in BC. So interesting guy to get to know, does something totally different from myself and Daryl, but we get to interact with him once in a while as well. And he'll actually be on tomorrow's Cloud Edition. So just a note on that, that's at 11:30 Pacific time tomorrow. And I'll be doing that with Rick and just talking through F5 Cloud Services use cases and security performance and global availability using the Cloud Services DNS products that they've released on there. A couple other things. There's a mailing list, darylandboo.com. If you head over there, the weekly technical newsletter that Daryl actually sends out by hand to everybody is something that I'm going to start to send out to everybody. You just sign up for the mailing list on there, and you'll get that in your inbox every Monday. The mailing list, or the individual emails that Daryl has been sending out, will turn into a monthly newsletter after a few weeks of transition here. So if you want to remain on the weekly newsletter, which I guarantee will actually have more stuff on it, because once we do this monthly, I'm not going to bombard you with all of the information anymore. So if you did find all of that technical information valuable, that'll be on the weekly newsletter. Also, I would say that I'll probably try to put on more interesting things in addition to the technical stuff into that weekly newsletter as well. So you'll want to sign up for that. Also, there's an archive of all the newsletters on darylandboo.com as well. And if you're listening to this via podcast right now, you'll want to hit subscribe. If you're not listening to this via podcast, we're available on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. All right, so without further ado, I want to bring on our special guest today. If anybody has looked up anything in the world of network engineering in the past 10 years and even further than that, you would have come across a couple guys that formed a website. Actually, I found some of their content through their website first, I realized. But yeah, I've been listening to them for since then. I've recommended them to everybody, but their names keep coming up regardless of whether or not you recommend them or not. So I will bring on Ethan. Hey, Ethan, how's it going?
Hey, Boo, how you doing? Boy,
I'm
for
good.
10 years, we keep coming up. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Can't get around you guys. Anytime you look up anything in the world of network engineering, like, you guys are prolific, I would say.
Yeah, as Greg would say, we're too stupid to quit. So we've just kind of kept at it, and yeah, 10 years later, we're still making podcasts and writing and YouTubing and all of that good stuff. So nice to be here today.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, we might dig into a little bit something that you just mentioned there as well. But I did also want to mention that I'm just super honored that you're even on this because I've tried to do a little bit of homework on you. And outside of what you present professionally, and you have your personal side as well, you don't do a lot of like other people's podcasts for this type of stuff that I've haven't been able to find.
Well, if the invites come up, I will do my best if my schedule permits. That's really what it comes down to. And you just happen to pop up on my Slack at a time when I could work it out. And part of that's
Like,
just traveling. We're not doing much right
right.
now, are we?
Right. And you guys do travel a lot. Like you guys are at the shows. I see you guys getting interviewed at the shows and you guys having lots of discussions at all the industry trade shows, right?
Yeah, I mean, not all of them. We go to a bunch. We try to get out there, and there's a lot of conferences that are interesting and things going on. So we will travel out to the West Coast or to Vegas or Boston or somewhere in Europe, just depending on what's going on. We
That's
have
a
to
tough
pick and
life.
choose, but yeah, we do travel.
Yeah, all neat places to head to for sure. So I wanted to spend a little bit of our first bit of our conversation here, if you don't mind, just kind of if you want to rewind the
Hmm.
history books as to how you guys actually got started with this whole thing. I recall reading Greg's blog early on before I got into podcasts or anything like
Yeah.
that. Did you have the same thing going? I can't recall.
Yeah, Greg and I both had blogs. That's how we found each other. I had a blog called cciecandidate.com, and that
Mm,
blog was chronicling my journey towards earning the CCIE certification. I was pretty detailed about it and had very
mm,
regular updates. Greg's site was etherealmind.com, and he was blogging fairly steadily about what he was doing at work and so on. And he was also a CCIE. And we ran into each other and had both kind of had the idea of, hey, we're interested in starting a podcast. We'd both been thinking about this independently before we even knew each other and
mm,
decided to collaborate with, in the very early days, there was a third guy, Dan Hughes. And the
mm.
three of us actually started in the beginning. Dan ended up going to work for Amazon in Ireland and wasn't able to continue being a public facing figure due to Amazon policy, if I remember right. But
Mm.
Greg and I soldiered on with it. So that's how it started, just wanting to do something other than simply write.
That's neat. So for the folks, I'll pick that apart just a little bit there. For folks who are not from the network engineering side of the house, a CCIE is a very coveted Cisco certification, and I would say among all of the certifications that I ever looked at, CCIE was just like levels above everything else. Like a lot of people had MCSE from Microsoft, and there were CompTIA certifications as well. But the Cisco networking education platform for certifications had CCNA, CCNP was like you're pretty good at that point, but to get to that CCIE level, that's dedication. You're probably doing networking full
You,
time, and you're
you're a glutton for
dedicating.
punishment. That's what it is. Because the whole thing about the IE was you'd have to pass a written test to qualify you to take a lab exam. And the lab exam meant you had to travel to a Cisco location and pass an 8-hour lab where they handed you a 3-ring binder with a bunch of tasks in it. Hope you get done by the end of 8 hours. We'll see you, kind of thing. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, it was just a different sort of an animal. It was taking all those things you learned and then applying them. And yeah, it was a
right.
different sort of a test, a difficult thing to get through. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can usually, I mean, for folks who might know a CCIE, you can tell a lot from their CCIE number. So yours is in the 20,000 range, which is still, I would say, anything below the 30,000 range is like an earlier CCIE. Anything below 10,000 is a very early CCIE, but in the 20,000 range, that's an early CCIE.
Yeah, I'm 20655. Have lost track of where the numbers have gotten to, but I think they're in the 40s, 50s, or is it even the 60s now? I'm not
I
even
think it's
sure.
over 60, my guess at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's up there. Yeah. So you put in a lot of time on that, and then you had some learnings that you were able to share with everyone, which is pretty awesome. Did you find that you were building community during that time just from the blog?
Yeah, it's funny. There were a couple of things that happened there. One was the reason I was doing it was just to help myself learn. But then, two, right, community came as a part
Mm,
of that. People would comment on my blog regularly. They'd interact with me on Twitter, maybe. And then when we jumped over and began doing the podcast, that grew that even more,
mm,
where we had even more interaction and more people were listening to us. We found a lot of people that maybe they were struggling to find time to read, but they could listen to a podcast in the car during their commute, let's say.
mm,
And that grew community as well, where people would, because of something to do with one of our blogs or with the Packet Pushers podcast, would find us and then find each other. And we ended up being kind of a proxy. I mean, I watch a lot more conversations than I participate in nowadays on the Packet Pushers Slack channel, for example. There's 1,000 odd people that are in the general channel going on all the time. And
yeah.
Greg or I aren't necessarily saying much of anything. Great communities going on in there.
That's really cool to see. I have been since joining that Slack. I've seen tons of conversations happening. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see how you guys have been able to connect everyone in that way. So let's talk about the early days of the podcast then. With the three of you guys on there, was it every week you guys were looking for more topics to bring up? Was it an easy kind of funnel to always have a subject for the show and guests to come on?
Scheduling guests is hard. Topics is not hard because there's always something going on. All three of us were very active in our day jobs or with consultant clients, as the case may have been, and had no lack of projects, things that we could translate into podcast fodder, something to talk about there. Plus, we're in 2010, so right at that point, we're pre SDN, we're pre OpenFlow even. We're kind of routing and switching, but things are starting to change. Things are starting to get become new and exciting, new technologies and ways of approaching networking, with SDN being at the middle of a lot of these things. And so there ended up being a lot of new stuff for us to talk about. One of the ways we found things to discuss was through Tech Field Day. If you know Stephen Foskett's Tech Field Day
Yeah.
organization, and and so on. In fact, you're tied in with F5 Boo, and one of the first Tech Field Days I ever attended was we visited F5 at some point. I remember that. I remember there was a big foyer, and there was the F5 logo there in concrete. You hear what the latest and greatest is from vendors through Tech Field Day, and so we picked up on a lot of things that we could talk about then. So topically is easy.
Mm,
Finding guests, that's the hardest part of this job, man. I'll tell you. Not finding them, but just getting them scheduled. People that are willing to talk, people whose employers will allow them to talk, people
mm,
whose jobs give them legal guidelines about what they're allowing that person to say, and and so on. So,
mm,
well, we've got a knack for it now. We just kind of keep chasing people down, and as the years have rolled by, what's happened is we can find people because they spoke at NANOG, let's say, or they
mm,
spoke at some kind of a conference, and we know they're public facing and have something to say. So it's
mm,
gotten a little bit easier that way. Plus, just the community. There's times where we'll
mm,
just reach into the Slack channel and say, "Hey, we want to do a show on X. Anybody in here know anything about that and is willing
mm.
to come on the podcast and chat?" And so it's gotten a little easier that way too.
You think people are getting a lot more used to the idea of being public facing, having a face or their voice on a podcast or a live stream at this point, as opposed to 10 years ago?
Yes and no. I mean, some people are still just, but the nature of being a person in IT, especially if you're an engineer, we really cater towards the engineering community. We're an
Mm,
introverted bunch. And so some people aren't willing to be out there just because of their personalities. But are we used to it more? I think, yeah, definitely, right? Especially with the pandemic, it just seems like
yeah.
everybody's gotten into this whole live streaming thing, and so
Mm,
on. It's become very, very commonplace. We're used to web cameras and seeing ourselves on video, and hearing ourselves on audio. So it's definitely gotten easier in that sense. People feel a little less exposed because it's kind of the way the world works and social media works anyway these days.
yep. No, for sure. And then while you're doing this podcast and you're developing it, all three of you were still working full time if not more, you guys were consulting, and so consulting is never just full time.
All depends on the job, but yeah, some of us consulted, some of us had full-time gigs. Sometimes I had a full-time dedicated to one employer and was consulting on the side and was working on Packet Pusher stuff too. So
Wow.
if you're asking, were we busy? Why, yes, we were, Boo.
And
So
developing content still, like just writing.
and writing, and to be able to speak effectively on a podcast that's technical, you need to do research, you need to do your homework and keep up with that.
Mm,
And time became Dan had to leave fairly early on. I'm not remember how many months he was able to be with us before he went to work for Amazon, but it was down to just Greg and I as co-hosts. And with if it was only one of us trying to do a weekly show and maintain families and full-time jobs, that would have been too much. But
mm,
being able to split the load between the two of us helped enormously.
mm,
And we leaned into the community to help us too. There was a space of
mm,
time where I took some classes and it was just impossible for me to be a podcast host. But one of our friends from the community, Tom Hollingsworth, who was
mm,
actually working for Tech Field Day now, he stepped in and was able to do some co-hosting stuff to help keep the boat floating. But time became, as the podcast grew and the following grew, and then sponsors would step in, and so there was a little bit of business going on for us that we really needed to pay attention to. Time
mm.
management was crucial. It was a difficult thing to keep up with, and to the point of, I don't think we want to do this anymore. We actually got to that point where we're like, why are we doing this? This is crazy. And there was a show, if you dig back through our catalog and go all the way back to Packet Pushers episode 200, we kind of
Mm.
put our heart on our sleeves there to the community. And we're like, guys, do you really want us to keep doing this? Is this important to you? We don't think we can keep going. And the outpouring from the community, we've still got a folder with all those emails saved. The outpouring was so
Yeah.
many people sent so many heartfelt emails to us. Please don't stop the show, et cetera, et cetera. That were like, "Oh, okay, this is the thing. We got to keep going." And then the rest of that story, Boo, is boring everybody to death. We turned it into a full-time job. So about 2015, we both Greg and I were in a position where we were able to take that step and turn it into a full-time business.
Mm,
I had finished up working with a medical startup that was having some funding challenges, and they couldn't really do what they'd hired me to do anyway. Greg had finished up a consulting gig, and we both looked at the work on our schedule with our Packet Pushers sponsors that were coming up and said, it's not enough, but let's try it anyway. Let's just see what
mm.
happens. And long story short, it's worked out pretty well.
Cool. That's actually the one thing the thing that I wanted to bring back up from your earlier statement there was, I remember listening to that episode and I was like,
Mm.
is this going to go away? Because I love listening to the show. And then all of a sudden these guys are talking about potentially pulling the plug there. But I'm so glad that you guys kept on going with it and found the way.
Yeah, we are too. In the long run, it's really paid off. It's neat to be in a spot now where we get to talk to the consumer community, everyone that's actually using networking and cloud technologies, building things, and the vendor community who are putting the products out there and trying to help us all solve problems and kind of sit in the middle of all of that.
Mm,
We feel it's a useful role. I've had to change my thinking from being hands-on building networks up to my elbows in a rack in a data center somewhere with a perf tile blowing cold air up my pant leg to what I'm doing now, which is research and understanding technologies and understanding, and then being able to explain to someone why they should care about this new product, new protocol, whatever it might be.
mhm.
But I figured out my role in the world now. It's been a career shift, kind of, but not really, in a way.
That is interesting. So did you find on your blog before you were talking about product, like on CCIE Candidate, you were talking about the actual products and how they worked, or was it just purely I'm going for my CCIE and these are the steps that I'm taking to that?
In that era, when I was focused on earning the IE certification, it was much more about protocols and how they work, and much less about product. Now, some product stuff popped up now and again, if I happen to be, say, deploying a set of Cisco switches, maybe I would have written something about that. I've certainly done some writing about F5. I've certainly done some writing about checkpoint firewalls and so on.
Mhm.
But back in the day, it was less about that and more about pure design and architecture. It's
Mm.
really warm in my room, Boo. I'm gonna kick my door open here because it's
Yep.
I'm cooking myself in my little studio.
Yeah, this is cool actually, even just seeing you on here, because when you go, for folks who haven't maybe visited your YouTube channel, this is the view that people see when you're on a live stream.
It's the current view. It's going to improve. I'm going to be moving house at some point. My kids are grown, and so my wife and I are changing our venue. And one of the things that's going to happen in that new house is will be a new studio layout. So hopefully it'll be a little bit cleaner. I've already got the room picked out. There's going to be a nice clean wall behind me and some pretty lights. We'll see what we come up with. But yep, this is my standard view right now. Got my Packet Pushers logo sign and some of my nerd stuff up on the wall back there.
Yeah, right on. Is there any special meaning to the routers behind you?
That's a lot of history for me. Those two.
Mm.
The one's a 2600. It's a very old router. It's pushing, it's probably 15, 20 years old, something like that. There's a 3700 underneath it, and now they're cheap. Now these
Mm.
routers you can get on eBay for less than $100 probably a piece. They don't really forward a lot of traffic by modern standards and so on, but they were a reminder of a time when those were five, 10, $20,000 products that you needed to know intimately to do the thing, whatever the thing was that you needed to do for the business. So so for example, that 3000 series router is that's the 2U one sitting underneath. I had that thing as a DMVPN router that was
Mm.
connecting my home office to a medical exchange network. At one point, I was one of the nodes on the network, and it was that was the guinea pig router. It was the first one I built for this new DMVPN deployment. And probably the code's still on there. If I were to fire it up and look, I bet that's still how it's configured even.
That's cool.
It's old, but it's a reminder of all the hands-on stuff and where Cisco was not all that many years ago compared to where they are now. And honestly, a lot of what we do today is the same, just faster, faster
Hmm.
chips, faster ports, more throughput, but a lot of the same technologies. Because for all the new stuff that's in networking, a lot of it stayed the same in a lot of ways.
Oh, totally. And so maybe we could talk too about your transition. So, actually, before even that, when you guys were coming up with, or when the community was just starting, was it mostly everybody was gathering on the websites and interacting through the chat on there? I never actually got into that side of it, not realizing I only was a listener.
There's a few ways. One were comments on the websites. Yeah, that got to be because of the world of spam and stuff. It got to be that's not really how people interacted so much. But that was one way. Twitter was another way. It was a pretty big Twitter community that was followed us and would interact, and it's still there. It's still a pretty active Twitter community. For sure. There was an IRC group, I think, that still exists. I had built an IRC channel on Freenode. I haven't logged into it in a long time because Slack kind of took over my life.
Mm.
But IRC was out there. It was free form, people just chatting about all kinds of things. But again, mostly networking. Many of the people that were in IRC have moved over to Slack now.
Mm.
But that's kind of the history. We get emails from time to time from people, because we
Mhm.
had and still have packetpushers@gmail.com. We've never gotten rid of that.
Mm.
But you'd be surprised, even though thousands of people might listen to a podcast, you might not hear anything. You might get one comment, you might get one email, maybe two. Nowadays, we have contact forms on our websites. There's the follow up page, which we tongue in cheek call the FU page. You can go there and follow up with us about whatever's on your mind. And we've had a good uptake on that. A lot of people use that to talk to us about the different shows and contact forms and so on. But to be honest, the way social media is, a lot of things have just changed, and then all the noise from spammers and such have really changed the way people interact. It's a different world now in that sense, and I think Slack has kind of become the new gathering place.
Mm, interesting. And so as the community builds out, before you guys decide to go full time with this, were there opportunities that present? I'm imagining that because people would hear your expertise on the show, you were presented with consulting opportunities. People were probably recruiters were probably coming after you.
Yeah, it's come up fairly regularly where, yeah, because they've heard us, they want us to do whatever it is. Book writing has been a big one.
Mhm.
We've been hit up by publishers to write books. That's come up from time to time. I've only done one where I collaborated with Russ White on a book about computer networking. Book writing's hard to make time for if you're focused on trying to make a living. It's very time consuming to write a book, and tech books especially don't make much money. Um, so it's difficult to prioritize that sort of a project, but that stuff's come up. Consulting, yes, we've gotten hit up from time to time to consult either with, oh, I consulted for a court case at one point, an oddball thing. Nothing I'd do again. It was a fairly horrible experience, but that was a thing that popped up in my world. Sometimes people who are investing in technology want our two cents on what we think about some technology that's emerging.
Mm.
There'll be an opportunity there. And then sometimes it's just like you think, plain old consulting. Hey, I'm building a whatever it is, and I'd love to get your guys' take on it. Or do you have time to come and work with us on the project? So then a lot of times we don't have that time, but yeah, those requests come in, sure.
Yeah, cool. And so you guys go full time with a bit of uncertainty there. You guys definitely could be employed in many, many different ways, and you guys chose to take the path where you didn't quite see what it would look like in the end, but you stuck with it. And can you comment on how that looked and how the first few months were of that?
The big thing for us was beginning to learn the business that we had undertaken. When you deal with sponsors who are wanting to get a message out there, we're trying to understand what they need and then making sure that what they need aligns with what we want to give to the audience. In other words, we don't just just because you rock up with a check doesn't mean you get on packet pushers. That's not how that works. We're very careful to match a vendor and a product with something that we think is going to be of value to the audience. So we got to get over that hurdle first. Once we're past that, then it's like, okay, we know the product and the vendor is a good match for the audience. How do we, what do they want? What does a person in marketing, let's say, want? What are they trying to achieve? Well, they got a message to get out. Yeah, but I don't want you to get up there and deliver a bunch of bullet points. I want to talk something technical and educational and help a person understand what it is your product does and what kind of a problem does it actually solve for them, not just get up there and blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to learn how to make all those things jive, what we wanted for the audience, how to make a living, and then how to make a sponsor feel like they're getting value for the dollar that they would spend. And man, we're still learning that to some degree. We've got a rhythm now. We've got a process, and we think we're doing fairly good most of the time with that, trying to keep everybody happy. But that was a big learning process for us because, Greg and I, especially, we're engineers first and foremost. We build things, we're architects, we design stuff and then bring it to life. This is a different animal. This is a whole different kind of way of thinking. We had to learn how to run a business. I'd had a bunch of little businesses on the side, but now we've got to learn accounting and we've got to understand the tax implications for our business. We had to figure out Greg, who is a UK resident, how to make him an owner in an American-based business. These were all little hurdles that we had to overcome that happened, pretty early on. We hired people, we hired employees. Okay, that introduces a whole other set of operational complexity to the business. It's not just getting on the mic in the morning and starting to talk now. Now all of a sudden it's like all of this significant things about running a business that we needed to understand, which sounds boring and tedious. Not like, well, boo, after we ordered the first Gulfstream, I think we each wanted our own person. Was it the helicopters first or the limos? I don't remember. It wasn't like that, man. It was more like, wow, okay, we've really committed to something big here, and there's a lot of minutia to make it happen. And of course, as engineers, we're detail-oriented nerds anyway, so we got to figure all this stuff out, which takes time.
The packet pusher's jet is
Yeah.
still in the driveway, I guess.
Yeah. Sadly, we fly cattle class, as we like to say, cheap tickets wherever we're going. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, maybe that would be a vendor flex move on you guys, kind of flying you out to analyst day or something in a jet, and maybe maybe that's like another level that you'll get to.
we
That would be neat.
we just want to be treated like everybody else. You know what I mean? So we get enough flack from the community about if you're dealing with sponsors, of course, people think that you just say anything because, oh, they're paying for it, right? So you just let them say whatever. And of course, we don't. We're trying to strike a balance of getting truth and actual value out in that discussion versus the cynics that are out in the audience that just assume that because someone paid for a message, they get to just make stuff up that sounds good. So no, we're not going to let someone, flex and then fly us first class to wherever and put us up in a posh hotel in the hopes that we're going to say nice things about them. So we're actually really careful about that stuff.
Which is very different from the culture of today, in that you have the influencer role out there, and they are like the travel influencers. They're looking for the free trips to the Bahamas, and they're looking to be flown out first class. And of course, they're going to make really nice Instagram posts about the places that they go to. But packet pushers, I've always found to be very honest. Especially Greg. I know Greg gets a little bit of flack for that, but Greg is he'll speak his mind. He'll have a couple beers while he does it, maybe sometimes, and you'll get his honest thoughts on anything.
Yeah, Greg and I complement each other in that way. Greg is a very analytical mind, and he loves the role of an industry analyst, where he's understanding what's happening across the industry, what a new technology is, what a new product is, and how it fits into things, and then performs that analyst role. I'm the engineer half of that. I want to know, yes, the analyst stuff is interesting, but I want to know how it works. I want to know
Will it
what
fall
the
apart?
risks are should I bring this technology into my environment and so on. And so
Mhm.
we both look at it critically. And but yeah, it is a good fit because Greg is very I'm very shy, boo. I don't want to be very outspoken. So I'm not gonna be quite as forthright sometimes
You can
as
play good
Greg
cop and
is
bad
with his
cop, right?
feelings. What's that?
You guys can play good cop and bad cop off of each other.
There's a
Yeah.
little bit of that, and actually, that cadence has worked out
Mm.
really well for us over the years, and it's also meant for a good mixture of content. Where I might
Mhm.
do a show that nerds out about some of the stuff I've been doing recently has been tied to new open source tools that are available in Python and how to do
Mm.
automation with these open source tools. And I'll talk to the creators of the product, and we'll just nerd out for an hour or something.
Mm.
Um, and Greg might do something that's more like, I want to have a discussion about segment routing and whether or not that's a good fit for the service provider industry in the long term. And he'll do a bunch of research and and so on. And
Mm.
so those are two very different kind of shows, both of which have value. But that's one of the cool things about having two different hosts. You're getting multiple viewpoints, and we both get to be ourselves. And yeah, just not to get straight too far from the point, boo, but right, being who we are and being honest about what we think about things, and that's a big part of our identity as the packet pushers.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of that, just having a couple of chats with you, I've gotten to know you a little bit more as well. But, got to know that you're actually into things outside of the world of networking. So you're into
Yes.
outdoorsy type stuff. So you're in New
Yeah.
Hampshire. Some
Hmm.
people might be able to tell from the accent there. But you've got some places that you can hike to, and some, we talked about mountain biking, fat
Yeah.
biking there as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so hiking's a big thing I've been doing for a lot of years, and this past year I've picked up mountain biking again. It was something I had done in the 20s, in the 20s. I'm not that old. In my 20s, I
Yeah.
lived in California for a couple of years, Southern Cal area, and rode around there. And I've just picked it up again I got fascinated by it. Started with e-bikes. So e-bikes, that is a bike with a motor, some kind of an electric motor in it that's battery powered. It's to give you assist as you ride around. And it's like, what kind of cool technology is that? How awesome is that? It's so
Yeah.
neat. And I ended up buying an e-bike. Um, the e-bike was delivered in a fat bike form factor where the tires were 4 inches wide. It's got a pretty burly frame. And this is a big thing. And you get on this thing, and with the motor and the battery, it's heavy. It's a heavy bike.
So you
It's
intended to buy a fat bike e-bike
I
when you said
intended
that?
to buy an e-bike, and just where I ended up in my shopping was the e-fat bike,
Okay.
version of it. Yeah. So in
Yeah.
fact, I can share a screen here. Let me
Yep.
scroll to the right picture. I'll show you. Okay. There. So you see that? That is
Nice.
that's an e-bike. So you see that square kind of in the bottom center of the frame. What's hiding behind that diamond square shaped panel is a motor. That is 1,000 watt motor under there that gives you drive assist. So if you there's a little
Oh, nice.
closer shot of it. You can pedal. It definitely is a pedal bike, but the watts input more energy into the system beyond just your legs. So the average human, or I guess I've read that a very fit athlete who's a cyclist can put about 250 watts into their bike, with their body. So the motor adds more energy to that system as much as 1,000 watts, which basically means you don't even have to pedal. The thing will just like drive you around, although you deplete the battery very quickly that way. There's
That-
up on the handlebar. That's the control panel, if you will. The plus and the minus gives you an assist level. You can assist between
oh,
1 and 9 if you set it up that way. And the upper right of the panel, you can see it says 54.5 volts. That gives you how much output the battery is. And when I took this picture, it was fully charged. But
mm.
it'll deplete over time as you ride around and dig into the power band.
So would you take this downhill, or is this trails, like not level trails, but modest trails?
Yeah, this is not a downhilling bike, really. You can definitely ride it around, but like you see the wires that are there. I'll give you another shot
Mm.
of the wires underneath. I'm a little concerned. Like if I was to beat this thing up on a trail, I do ride it on trails a little bit, but if I was to get too aggressive, I'm gonna break a wire on a rock or something, and then, then all of a sudden my power's gone. And
Yeah.
that bike weighs with the battery and the motor. You're into like 70 pounds. It's a very heavy bike that
Oh
I don't
wow.
want to be pushing out of the woods because I busted a cable. So
So would you
my
ever
use
ride it
case
without
is,
assist on?
would I ever ride it without?
Without the assist on, like at 70 pounds, is it something that you can ride without
You
assist?
you can, but man, you wouldn't want to go uphill with it. You can get it going, on level ground for sure, but definitely one of the things that I monitor when
Mm.
I'm riding is there we go. Go
Oh
back
wow,
that way.
in comparison.
One of the things I monitor is how much energy is left in the battery, because
Hmm.
I want to be back to my stopping place when I'm before that battery runs out. Because man, it's hard to imagine riding this thing without. Again, you could do it, but boy, I really wouldn't want to. That would be tough.
We've
Is
got a
again, it's
comment
heavy.
from a loyal listener here, Eric Chen. Ethan, have you ever tried to take that bike on the Kangamangus Highway?
Gangamongus. No, I have not, but I could. Let me get to the right picture here. So I've got a rack on the back of my car uh, where I've loaded up a couple of bikes here, and that rack will handle the weight of that fat bike. And that's been on my head to go up to the Kangamongus and do that ride. I could certainly do it. That would be lovely. There's also a lot of rail trails that are up in that area, Eric, like the Presidential Rail Trail, that's fairly flat because it covers, as implied by the name, an old railroad bed. So it's more like down by the river. The terrain isn't too bad, and that bike would go great. And so I thought at some point I'll haul that bike up there for that, and do that. But
So is
so let
this
me point
a
out.
famous highway? Or
Yeah, it's a scenic byway in New Hampshire that goes through the heart of the White Mountains, and it's there's a lot of curves. It's pretty steep. It goes up to a high point and then down the other side. It's 32 miles long, connecting a couple sections of the state that if that highway wasn't there, you're basically going around all of the mountains to get between those 2 points.
Mm.
The Kangamogus is beautiful. There's lots of places to pull off. There's lots of hiking trails available from there. Scenic views you can, and they maintain it all year round. You can get there. They do keep it plowed and everything all year round, although it can be quite the thing in winter to get through it. So the picture I pulled up here, Boo, this is not an electrified bike, but this is a bike I built from the frame up. I bought the frame and then put everything else on it. I was so enamored of the fat bike experience that I got from riding the e-bike that I wanted just to have a regular bike that I could take on the trails and ride around without worrying about beating up the bike.
Mm.
So I built this one, and the tires on this bike are even wider than the other bike. These are 4.8-inch wide
Wow.
tires. They're really designed for snow. The whole idea is you can ride and get some flotation on the snow with a tire that is that wide. You run it at a very low psi, and you can ride in the snow, and that's a thing. Although I love riding it all year round. All the
Mm.
time. I haven't even had a chance to ride in the snow yet because I just built the thing this spring.
Yeah.
Um, but there's for scale, just how big that tire is. You can see my hand on it. I've got
Wow.
let's see, there's another picture in here. Sorry for all the scrolling. There you go. So the bike on the left, that's my wife's mountain bike, which is a traditional mountain bike. That tire is, probably 2 inches wide, something like that.
Hmm.
And it's almost like, is it miniature? No, that's a real regular mountain bike, like you'd see. There it is.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just,
yeah. The diameter from the other angle looked tiny, but it is still 24, 26 inches.
yeah, exactly. It's a 26-inch tires, and it's a bit of a smaller frame than average, but still, just to compare the scale of a fat bike to a regular mountain bike, it's pretty pretty startling. And
Yeah.
riding that fat bike around in the woods is just a ton of fun. That you got grip forever.
Mhm.
Riding up anything that's steep or even loose, crazy, rocky terrain. There's a dam area where was some flooding and a bunch of wood had washed up and from dead trees and branches and stuff, and I can ride right over that, no problem. The fat bike just goes. It's pretty great.
Are you seeing those a lot more commonly now then, the fat bikes on your trails?
More and more, I'm seeing more people with them. The frames are becoming more common. Like I said, I built mine from scratch because I wanted the experience of building a bike. But increasingly, you are seeing more and more folks out there on that fat bike, on a bike like that, because they make them. They even scale them down so you can get one that's got the huge wide tires, but a kid can fit the frame. And so
Mm.
I've noticed a bunch of families where dad and the boys or something like that will each be out on their fat bikes on the trails now. Mountain bikes are still king. Because that's where all the technology is, the carbon frames, and they're very light and they're very stiff, and they've got the radical suspensions if you want to do the downhilling. That all still happens with the mountain bikes as opposed to fat bikes, but increasingly, yeah, fat bikes are out there.
Mm. And I noticed there's no suspension. There's just enough give with the tires that you don't really need suspension?
I could put a front fork on this bike and get a more compliant ride. But that would have added another, for the forks I was looking at, $600 to $800 to the build, and it was already getting to be a pricey build. I think I probably got around 2,500 into that bike as is.
Mm.
And the front fork for me, like in the winter, most people say if you're building it to be a snow bike, nah, you don't need a front fork or any kind of suspension at all. As far as the tires, the tires are not a substitute for suspension. I'll put it that way. Do they help smooth the bumps out a bit? Yeah, they definitely do, because you don't run those tires very hard. Like a mountain bike, you might be running 60, 80, 100 psi, all depending on the bike and what it's designed for.
Mm.
This bike, I run my tires around somewhere between 10 and 15 psi, depending
Oh,
on the
really?
terrain I'm going over. Yeah, it's very low.
Wow.
And it is quite a comfortable ride, but no, it doesn't take the place of suspension. So for me, I ride mostly cross country style trails. You know, yes, there's up and down, but they're not like, I don't do jumps and flips and all that kind of acrobatic stuff and I don't go like hard downhill. There's a downhill mountain bike park near me. I've never taken that bike down, there. That front fork is, man, I'd be worried that I'd hit something wrong and it would be all over. I'd crack the
Oh,
frame and that'd be it. My bike would be dead. So,
yeah.
so that's not what I built the bike for.
Yeah. Wow, that is really cool. A nice little departure from creating content and talking tech all day. Although it sounds like it's a segue into tech, anyways, across with the e-bike side of this.
Well, what I found, for myself, Boo, is I need to have time away from screens and from technology. There's a certain kind of I don't know if pressure is the right word, but there's a certain kind of stress I think that comes on a human being when we are constantly faced with tech, whether that's our phones or Netflix or Twitter or whatever it is. And I have found that I do better when I do have to deal with that stuff when I get some time away from time to time. And so hiking, being off in the woods, biking, off on a trail where you're again not devoid of technology, but somewhat disconnected from the constant dopamine addiction of seeing how many likes you have and what you're going to watch next as you're binging or whatever. For me, it makes my quality of life better just really disconnecting. I still like taking pictures and shooting some video. I might throw a GoPro on the front of my bike, let's say, because I might want to, for recreational purposes, make a video or do something later. But for me, that is the long and the short of it. Get disconnecting fully is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, especially given how much you are connected. And that's interesting to hear that you're still creating your own personal content with your own personal videos after you guys have spent your whole work week creating content, creating video and creating audio for people. And you're still out there, doing little bits on your own.
Yeah, I'm a nerd at heart still, so I can't help it. I do enjoy that kind of stuff
Yeah.
too. So yeah, I mean, I have a personal YouTube channel where I've got a bunch of hiking videos I've collected over the years, some of which are terrible because they were taken on a BlackBerry in 2012 or something like that. I'm trying to get better with it and figure out what I can really get out of a GoPro and just have fun with it rather than it being a thing I've got to hit publish on because it's part of my job. Yeah,
Right.
just have something that's fun and recreational in that way.
There's no release schedule for your GoPro footage.
No, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And so what does, compared to what Packet Pushers look like when you guys made that transition to go full time to what does Packet Pushers look like now? Like, how did you guys even evolve from that, going from part time to full time, from full time to now?
hmm Um, I think the best way to describe that is to describe the number of people that we work with. So we have two full-time employees. One is Drew Conray Murray, very well known to the industry. He was with Network Computing. In fact, I worked for
Mm.
Drew. Drew was my editor when I was writing for Network Computing back in the day.
Mm.
And Drew recruited me to deliver talks at Interop over a period of years. And Drew became available, and we snatched him up. So he's our content director. And then we have Robin Young, who, again, very experienced in the industry, had worked with small companies doing media for IT. And she became available. And so we hired her. And she's our business manager, business development, does all kinds of work for us. And we need them both desperately. And I think that, in a nutshell, could summarize what Packet Pushers is. The four of us that are full time employees are incredibly busy, all four of us, all the time, keeping up with what needs to be done. We've launched several more shows, for example. It's not just a podcast we put out weekly. I have to think about this, 6 or 7 shows that we're doing now,
Wow.
many of which are weeklies, not all of them, but many of which are. And not all of us are the main hosts for them, but we are involving several other hosts from the community, co-hosts. I primarily do heavy networking, what used to be the original Packet Pushers with Greg. I also co-host Day 2 Cloud with Ned Bellavance. We're nerding out on cloud technologies all the time. Those are weekly shows that demand a lot. Greg and Drew do the Network Break. That's a news and analytics show, news and analysis about the industry. That's every week. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
Mm.
And more. There's other shows, and then I won't take you through the whole thing. You'd be really bored, Boo. But we
Oh,
have
no,
more shows there.
not at all.
But all of that content that we put out every week, in addition to the YouTube channel, for example, that means editors. Well, we keep
Mm.
two audio editors and one video editor pretty busy. That we're always giving them new content that we recorded this week, and here's how it needs to be mixed down, and here's a list of timestamps where we noticed there were collisions or problems that need to be fixed, etc.
Mm.
And then more, we hire people for our membership site. We launched a membership site a couple of years ago called Ignition. So for
Mm.
people that want even deeper educational content from us, $99 a year. And there's courses and white papers and deep articles that are meant to make you a better IT professional.
Mm.
All of that stuff is incredibly time consuming. There's a lot to doing what we do now. And we need not just Greg and I, we couldn't do half of what Packet Pushers does now without all of the people that we've been fortunate to be able to involve in our world.
Mm.
I think that's the best way to describe it. And we keep trying new things. I've got a new show on YouTube I launched on our channel, The Packet Exchange. I'm trying it. I don't know. Maybe it's terrible. And after a couple of months, I give up. But that's been our formula for years. We just keep trying stuff. Most things work. Not everything does. And we just keep trying stuff. Well, to build a new show for YouTube, that's a thing. You got to plan and research content, and you got to set up your cameras. And you got a guy, you got camera in your face right now. All this stuff takes time to make it work.
Yeah. Is this what you envisioned 10 years ago, 5 years ago? Is this where you thought things would be?
I think I had hoped it would be a reasonable living and I wouldn't have to stress too much about money. That was the best I'd hoped for and didn't know if it would ever be a full-time thing. But again, I had hopes. Uh, and it worked out way better than that, is the best way to put it. The need for people who have engineering background and understand technology and are willing to share that with people and then can communicate with vendors. There's not that many folks out there that are doing that. There's a lot of companies that are like pure media. That's all they do is media. Have you ever worked in the industry? No. Okay. Well, what they say is interesting and useful, but it's different. It's just a different perspective. So, there are increasingly people like us that are out there, but not just not a lot. And so we found that there's just a need for us to keep doing what we do. Um, we're also finding that as big media is slowly dying away, it's not what it was. The Interop show, we were watched it shrink from 15,000 people in attendance to like 3,500 over a period of years. That was an independent show for the networking industry. That's essentially gone.
Mm.
It's still there. I still think they're doing their thing. I don't know what's happening in 2020, the pandemic year, but that's been tough, to
Yeah.
watch that stuff. But to our advantage, I guess it's left a bit of a void where we're a different way to communicate with for vendors to communicate with the community and for the community to communicate back with vendors about what's going on. And so it's succeeded way beyond what I expected. It was a dream, like a fantasy. Wouldn't it be cool if with some of the sponsorship money we're getting, we could hire our friends in the community that are really smart to share their knowledge and pay them for it? How awesome would that be? Well, we do that all the time. It's just, yeah, sorry, man, you caught me. It's one of those things that was really important to us for a long time to be able to give back to the community. And we've been able to do that. And it's just been a highlight. It's not just our success. We've tried to, we got to feed our own families, but we've been trying to bring other people along with us and have been able to do that in more than we ever expected that we would. And so there are a lot of days where it's a drag and a grind, but then a lot of other days where you sit back for a moment and pinch yourself and go, yeah, kind of living the dream. So
That's amazing. I always appreciate what you guys put into it and how you guys have done that. Like, come from a place of people who were just trying to help community through sharing knowledge to now being able to help so many people from sharing your knowledge, but also facilitating other people to share their knowledge and just building a community based on knowledge. It's absolutely amazing, and it's amazing that you guys can feed your families and feed other families through it. So I gotta say, that's what more could you want out of life, really?
Nailed it. Yeah. What more could you want? Exactly right, Boo. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk people through like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so once you're able to feed your family, I think ultimate fulfillment is figuring out how you can help other people fulfill all of their hierarchy of needs and get them shelter and get them food and water and get them the ability to feed their families. And hopefully they get to the point where they've gotten to that point and they are looking to do the exact same thing. And how cool would the world be if we can get everybody up to that point? We've got another listener question here. Eric Chen, what's your favorite part of your day? Is it on air, off air, and your proudest moments?
Oh, well, that's a difficult one to answer. Favorite part of my day. I am very driven by my calendar, so every day is different. So, for example, tomorrow I don't have anything on my calendar, which is very rare. But I'm looking forward to it because it means I'm going to be able to, with luck, I'm going to be able to write something. For example, get a bit of research done. So there's a favorite part of my day where I'm sitting down, getting going on a project because I'm always looking forward to what I'm working on. But I'll admit I run out of gas after 8, 9, 10 hours of doing that in my day. I'm kind of done, and I also look forward to, all right, I'm gonna go eat some dinner. I'm tired. Had a long day. So there's both of those things. I am not sick of recording podcasts, and I've done. It's got to be hundreds or maybe more than 1,000 podcasts now that I've recorded
Yeah.
over time. I still like doing it. I love getting together with somebody who's super enthusiastic about and knowledgeable about a topic, and if we just have a good conversation about it, oh, that's great. I still love doing that. Proudest moments? I don't know. To be honest, Greg, and I don't think in terms of pride as such. Are we proud of Packet Pushers and what we've created here? Yeah, I sure. Who wouldn't be? I guess, right? But highlights for us is that after 10 years, people are still listening and providing us feedback because they're getting value out of it. So somehow we haven't blown it up. We're still sticking with it. So there's a sense of pride that comes just with longevity.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I so far I haven't found anything close to what you guys are. You guys are unique in your backgrounds and how you guys have your journey, I would say. Your journey to get to where you are, from being experts in the industry to sharing that expertise to building a platform around that. That's 100% unique. Like I don't see anybody else in this space whatsoever doing that. And so I got to say, it's going to be hard to ever challenge what you guys do. And at the same time, I recognize that challengers are great because rising tides raises all ships. But at the same time, it's hard to find anybody close to offering what you guys offer. And Eric sends his thanks for that.
Well,
Cool.
there's certainly other networking podcasts and such that are out there, Boo. I mean, they do exist, but so I appreciate what you were saying, but we aren't the only ones. There are other people out there sharing knowledge too.
Yeah.
So we try to amplify those all the time. For example, in our newsletter, we have a weekly newsletter called Human Infrastructure Magazine, and we do share other videos and blogs and podcasts that the community's been writing, trying to. There's so much good stuff out there. We do try to share it.
Yeah. And I love hearing other viewpoints anyways. Like, it's great to be able to get one person's view because they're shaped from different experiences. You'd have a certain, especially in technology, somebody has one bad outage, somebody blames maybe the F5 on it and it wasn't the F5. And so everybody who didn't realize it wasn't the F5 gets this viewpoint of, hey, I had this bad experience with this thing. And it maybe shapes how you think about that entire ADC industry or whatever. So people are going to comment differently. So I can appreciate checking multiple sources and then looking at people's backgrounds to understand where they're coming from.
Diversity of views is extremely important. And we try to bring on new people and new voices all the time for exactly that reason. Tell me I'm wrong. I would love to understand that I am wrong so that, make the opinion better and more well-rounded on behalf of the community. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, we've hit the hour point. I don't want to keep you for extra long here, but maybe you can just spend the last few seconds letting everybody know, if they haven't figured it out already, how to get a hold of you, or how to listen to all of your content or read your content.
Yeah, Twitter at EC Banks is one way. I don't engage in Twitter as much as I once did. Twitter's a scary place, man. I'll tell you. But I'm there. I do pay attention to mentions. You can email me, ethan@packetpushers.net. That goes directly to my mailbox. And I can't promise immediate responses, but I generally get through all my email when people have things they want to address. And the rest is packetpushers.net. If you go to packetpushers.net, we got a banner at the top of the page. Click through to subscribe. That'll show you all the different feeds that we have, the different podcasts and other places where you can subscribe to the information that we have to offer. Generally, since it's funded by the sponsors, it's not going to cost you anything. So packetpushers.net for that.
Very cool. All right, Ethan, I thank you very much for coming on today. And I thank you and Greg for all of the stuff that you've done for the community. It's helped me out a lot. I would say it's shaped my career, and I'm sure it's shaped lots of other people's careers. So thank you very much. And thank you for coming on the show today.
You're welcome. I really, really enjoyed it, Boo. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. I will roll the credits, and I'll see you backstage in a sec anyways here. Thanks for checking this out today. If you're watching via YouTube right now, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Also click the bell for notifications. That way you will find out when we are dropping a new video or when we're going live. Also, there's darylandboo.com. If you head over to that, leave your name and email address, we will drop a weekly technical newsletter in your inbox every Monday. Also, this is available via podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Head over to one of those, hit subscribe, and you'll be able to listen to us in the car on your commute or during a walk or a run. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.